surprise and delight that we turned up in such numbers on such a morning as this. Now we're running a little bit behind time already. We've been giving delegates time to arrive. We have a very big programme before us today, so I don't propose to say a great deal in introducing the convention, but there are one or two things I think I ought to refer to. The extremely important developments have taken place in the field of employment. One of the problems that we worry about a great deal in this area, of course, is the problem of jobs, because our unemployment rate is one of the highest in the city, perhaps in the country. And it's great satisfaction, therefore, that we've been able to persuade the authorities to get going with the Peppermill Industrial Estate and to take the first steps to get the new Craig Hall Industrial Estate underway. The Peppermill Estate, as you know, of course, is now in the hands of the Scottish Development Agency, and we hope to see that going ahead very soon indeed and providing employment for people in this area. Big development that is taking place and is just about to be launched in fact tomorrow, is the opening of the neighbourhood block. You remember that some time ago we had the idea of converting a block of empty houses in Idremines Terrace to community use. Now we had a lot of trials and tribulations in the preparation of that, but the block has now been finally completed and we move in tomorrow, not into full operation, but one of the most important schemes, the education scheme, does take off tomorrow, and we hope it will be a success. We've been talking for a long time about rehabilitation in this area, and we did get the Craigmillar Castle scheme off the ground. We got the houses rehabilitated, and then unfortunately the district council reneged on many
things for their area. And this was quite something, because I think it's true to say that we are the only community group who have got this programme, or I think other ones at local authorities. In fact, we said in the thing that it was the people themselves looking at their problems with the help of their advisors, and that we were taking on extra staff. We have in fact taken on that extra staff, 3 directors, planning workshops, the community. Exciting projects we have. Not just
Scottish map or a national map, but truly on the international map, which is an enormous achievement, I think, with all the enormous claims made upon international agencies for help, with all the claims made on international bodies for publicity, that Craigmillar has become so famous, I think, is an enormous problem to everyone concerned. I'm also truly amazed, Jack, and impressed at the size of his audience on a wet, damp Sunday morning in the second week of December. I remember when I was standing as Labour candidate for Galloway, way back in 1950, my smallest meeting was a meeting of one. I got to the schoolhouse, and there was one old gentleman sitting at a desk. And in those days I was very young and active, and I thought, well, I promised to make a speech, so I'll make a speech. So I gave a speech to this one man on Labour's plans for whatever they were in 1950. And he sat very patiently in the schoolhouse for half an hour. And with all the enthusiasm of youth, I hoped rather that I converted him. And then I thanked him for coming. Well, he said, there's no thanks due to me. He said, I had to be here. You see, I'm the school servitor. He was the janitor of the school. So it is really an enormous privilege to see so vast an audience today. I suppose I ought to say something to begin with about the BBC and perhaps link up later with some of your problems. I'm not really, in spite of Jack's flattering remarks, much of an expert on the other media. I'm sure some of you in the audience will know more about that. But on the broadcasting thing, the BBC comes in for a lot of attack from various quarters. Those of you on the council who think you get letters, too many letters complaining, the BBC gets 450,000 letters a year, not all of them by any means favourable. Quite a proportion of those come from Mrs. Mayor Whitehouse. We are, in fact, the target of almost daily criticism by MPs, members of the public. Not that one complains about this, I think it's inevitable in a large organisation. One of the problems of the BBC is really the achievement of political balance. And everybody's judgment about what is politically unbiased differs. We put on a programme which pleases one party and is denounced by the other three parties. We put on a programme which pleases three parties and is denounced by the fourth party. I sometimes think that the test of total impartiality is to be attacked by all the political parties for all the programmes one does. We're also criticised sometimes for the size of the licence fee, which is perhaps a sore point now, and I better keep quiet after I made these few remarks. But when you consider £18 moment, which is 5p a day, when you think what you get for your 5p on a Saturday evening, for instance, starting with Doctor Who, and the Generation Game, and the Duchess of Duke Street, and Starsky and Hutch, and if you want him, Parkinson, interviewing somebody, and a football match and sport, that's not really a bad 5p's worth. And I think in fairness to the success of the BBC, it is an indication that we sell so many of our programmes abroad. We sell about 7,000 programmes. Many of our programmes are widely admired, liked, enjoyed in the countries as far away as Australia, Canada, America, and so on. We have a very high professional standard of broadcasting, which makes us the envy of the world. I think the two things, perhaps the quality of our broadcasting, and the second point, that we do manage to survive without political interference. We have developed a system of arm's length control by the politicians. So where they complain about our programmes, they don't attempt to interfere in the preparation of our programmes or the running of our programmes. And we have built up, this is a very, very difficult thing for a large organisation which touches people's lives at various points and spends such a great deal of money to keep free of interference. And when we get the assembly, we must be equally vigilant, I think, whichever party runs the assembly. I'm not now talking about which party it is or might be, but whichever party, to keep this tradition of political independence of the politicians before broadcasting. What kind of improvements and accessibilities could we make to the broadcasting scene with an organisation like Craigmillar? The first thing, of course, is a very obvious one, is do let the news media know what is going on. Give them plenty of advance warning. I'm sure you do this. But in all organisations, things get forgotten and overlooked. And I know from experience that sometimes quite famous people arrive in a town from abroad, international figures, to speak to some organisation, which would immediately make a very eye-catching headline for a BBC report or a news story, without you actually knowing that they've gone, that they've been here. So do keep the newsrooms informed. I'm sure you keep the local newspapers informed. Do keep all the media. It's a significant work, and in a busy and crowded schedule, I can see that it gets overlooked. But better, I think, supply the media, newspapers and radio and television, with more than they need. Because sometimes they can see an interesting story or pick up an interesting picture when perhaps the layman doesn't spot the significance of something. So do keep them very well supplied with everything you're doing. There are perhaps ways we, on a national level, and a lot of thought is being given to this, how one can give community groups more access to network programs, the open door program, the writing programs. All these things help. And again, if these programs do come up here, stake your claim, write in. Write to the controller, or write to the Director General if you want. Other people do it. Stake your claim and get into the queue. And it's the more you succeed in a way, the more you go on succeeding. The fact you've done so well already and have been recognised internationally, all these things help, I think, in getting you publicity. There is a bigger problem of local community radio which is being studied by the Annan Committee at the moment, and this is something else I think you should be watching very closely. The Annan Committee is a committee set up to consider the reorganisation of broadcasting, and it may come down in favour of some form of local, very local radio stations. Now these radio stations will not be feeding the network, but they will be, as it were, enabling the community to talk to one another. The first point I mentioned is getting access to all your views and ideas, telling the world, telling Scotland, telling Britain what Craigmillar is doing. That's getting onto the network. The other thing is that maybe under the Annan proposals, and you should be keeping a close watch of the publication of the Annan Committee, there may be possibilities of opening small local radio stations. Nothing like as professional as the big commercial or public corporations. But frankly, quite cheap, rather, and again, frankly, and unashamedly, rather amateur organisations, which will enable people in a neighbourhood to talk to each other. A lot of the material they use will not be of interest to the outside world, will not be of interest to the network, but it will be of interest to the people in the area. They had a pilot scheme of this kind in Bristol, which might be worth one of your panel studying at some time, where they did exactly this. They set up this very small station. There are problems, of course, of control. You want democratic control, you want local control. On the other hand, you want some degree of independence of people running it. The advantage of these local stations is, if the Annan Committee comes up with ideas on this, is that they're not too strict about schedules. One of the awful penalties of television, as some of you will hear, David playing with me once, you get about 2 minutes and down comes the acts and that's the interview. There's the awful problems of timing, the fanatical obsession of hitting the exact second of the minute, which affects professional broadcasters. It has to, of course, they've got to do their job. BBC, as we are developing enormously the local side of it, Orkney and Shetland are having chances of an open radio Highland, and we are putting in small teams of service communities. Again, these are communities which are still feeding the network. You're thinking more of communities feeding each other, aren't you? This entirely depends on Annan. If Annan will allocate wavelengths or licensing commissions, then I think this could be a very good future.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask Professor Thompson, where do you stand insofar as control concerns with the British BBC and how much freedom where reasonably good pay. You have got representing the kind of programme that maybe the Scottish people and probably maybe yourself as in control of the Scottish PC would like to see.
Well, the answer to your first thing, I'm a member of the UK Board of Governors. I'm one of the 8 governors appointed by the Queen. I don't think it's because she liked my face or anything, but my name came up one day. And the 8 governors who were appointed by the Queen took on the whole of the UK BBC. And in that capacity, I'm responsible for as much for Yorkshire or Lancashire or Wales as I am for Scotland. In fact, next week we're going to appoint a new top man for the BBC, the new director. Well, we're not going to appoint him, but we're going to carry on our deliberations towards filling this job, Director General in succession to Sir Charles Cullen. So if any of you want a £25,000 a year job, haven't got your application in yet, I can assure you that hundreds of other people have got theirs in. It is an advisory of the Council as far as programmes emanating from England. But you can comment on those programmes, and if you have any complaints about them, let me know and I'll pass them on. But even yes, I get to point of view on some of the local agents.
The one in housing, can you hear me?
Stand close to the microphone, Dave.
Not us only, but the community. That employment should be one of the major priorities that we're facing this year and many years to come. Housing equally is a very, very important priority, and particularly in Craigmillar. The last year's work done the Housing Working Party, I think we've been a wee bit depressed on the Housing Working Parties in the last year because of the many setbacks that we've had in the housing field. The setback we had in the Craigmillar Castle environmental improvement, one of which, after a tremendous amount of meetings and time spent at local level and at government level, we finally convinced not only the local authority but the government to increase their expenditure on environmental improvement from the normal £200 per house to about £1,100. And that in itself was a major breakthrough from any standards, where the government usually recognises that the environmental improvements are worth about £200 a house. We, due to our pressure, managed to get them to agree to spend about £1,100 a house, which I thought myself was a major breakthrough.
From long experience in Craigmillar, that unemployment has been one of the endemic problems in the area. And I think it's very clear to everyone who's involved, whether as a local resident, as someone who's working with the Festival Society, or as outside consultants or helpers, that very many of the problems that we spend most of our time on in Craigmillar have at their roots the fact that for years and years and years, families in this community have no chance to work and have never had a chance to work. And it's fundamentally at the root of very many of the social problems that we face today, that unemployment has for so long been so high. Now, I don't believe that many people actually realise how bad unemployment is in Craigmillar and how bad it has always been in Craigmillar. Because I believe that if it was realised, the government and the local authorities and the various agencies couldn't have stood back for so long without putting some major attention into doing something about unemployment. Figures were simply not available about how bad unemployment was. Well, that from today onwards is no longer going to be a reason, far less an excuse. Because since the last time we were here, rather in the Jack Kane Centre, the Employment Working Party instructed that a work survey should be done throughout Craigmillar, the results of which we've now got. And unemployment is currently, and probably has for some time, unemployment is currently running at a rate between 22 and 30%. Not 5%, not 7%, not the Scottish level of unemployment, but just about 30% throughout Craigmillar. That means that very nearly 1 in 3 of all the families haven't got the breadwinner at work. And the staggering thing that comes out of the survey is that in very many cases, the people who are out of work have been unemployed for more than 2 years. Now this has gone on generation after generation, and we find now there are families in Craigmillar where no member of the family has ever had a chance to work. Is it here? There's been an announcement that the Peppermill Industrial Estate down at Peppermill House is to be developed. It's taken a great deal of fighting by this community to get that industrial estate started. The Scottish Development Agency has now committed itself to undertaking the development of that estate as a matter of greatest urgency. It will be started very, very soon. It's not going to solve the unemployment problems in Craigmillar, but it's going to begin to tackle them. But I believe that, as we all know, that unemployment has never been dealt with, even when unemployment in the country as a whole has been down at 2% and 3%. It's always been high in Craigmillar. In 1971, when there was a boom, you'll remember the boom in the country. We don't remember it in Craigmillar, because unemployment was then still at 14%. Twice as high as it is around the whole country now. So, but even when there's a boom in the country, it passes places like Craigmillar by. And so it's no use us depending on the economic recovery coming to help us out. It hasn't helped us out before, it's probably not going to help us out again unless we fight for it. So as a community, we've got to go to it and create our own work. We've got to say to the people who've got the money, who've got the skills, who've got everything to offer, we're going to make work in this community for the people who've always been out of work. There are skills lying around every street in this community. Among the 1,000, just over 1,000 adult male people out of work in Craigmillar. That's the number. There are skills within that 1,000 that could be used to make work, to make industry, to make employment. And so what we're on about in Craigmillar Festival Society, what we're on about in this community in relation to employment, is not sitting back and complaining, is not sitting back and saying, please come and build your industrial factories in Craigmillar, though we want them as well. But what we're saying is, we're going to go about it ourselves. We're going to start off community-based industries to provide the kind of jobs that people need, to provide the kind of services and the goods that people need.
I thought that at one time that there wouldn't even be a communications working party at all in the morning, because we'd be working all over the place for the rest. Over the year, just as planning of all these working parties is an umbrella topic which covers all areas, so at the other end of the scale, communications is a kind of inverted umbrella that tries to service all areas. Whenever housing or social welfare wants a leaflet or anything, they come to us. So it's not as though we're just 1/8 of the whole planning workshop, but kind of the whole 8/8 in a funny way. The role at the convention, it started off thinking about a planning game. What has ended up is that these, I don't know if you noticed, these strips of paper up the back of the hall, we're going to list on these all the priorities for action that come out of the other 7 working parties that are working just now. They've all got their sheets of paper and they all bring them back here. And Lily and I will smash out a voting form, as well as people who are delegated to go and write these priorities up under the headings. We hope within between 12:30 and 1 to have the voting form duplicated, and then we can distribute it to every delegate when they're there between 12:30 and 1, and over lunchtime they can cross out of the 50 or 70 or how many ever priorities across the whole spectrum of it. It'd probably be at the counting stage while the review's on stage. The minute you see the review on stage, come out and you'll find us somewhere trying to count through 160 or 200 voting papers, and you can just take a batch and we'll let that out. So I think that's
clear about it. There's a bit on the back of the program that explains about it. If you still want to find some information about the one you run here, which is is it 1 month or is it? Yes, it's really well. It's not as, and it seems well, I don't know. I mean, you say even on complaints, criticism, I don't know what. Wait, fire away. See how it goes, huh? There seems to be quite a lot of advertising in it, which I presume pays for it like it's free. Was that a bit of a purchase for myself to know how, what it costs to produce something like this?
Well, I'm conscious about £360.
For how many?
For 8,000.
300.
That's by a rough rule of thumb, that is our front page, our dress page is all photo typeset, and all the other pages are typed by Lily. 11 pages photo ready. So it's roughly sort of £100 every 4 pages, with the odd 60 for 4 typesetting.
I'm wondering if there might be an opportunity for the two of you over lunch to get together and have a chat along these lines, and maybe we could open the discussion towards
that one runs into the problem of being commercially viable, and many English new towns, development corporation, community development departments a long time ago, seen as part of their role in subsidising the papers to allow them to have total content of what they wanted to say. And that brings in John's point here about, I think it's always quite sad that some commercial stuff has to creep in. Now I know that some of it needs an outlet. Some of that commercial stuff's your label counsellors and certain other things. But I think what space you have, it's crucial to get in what you truly want to get in. And it's always hitting this balance. I think it's unfortunate, that the commercial thing has to be influenced. Although people are concerned about that when you're at the mercy of others, if it was grant aided, they may have some kind of influence over its content. So therefore
people join us for this and that, and it must be hundreds and hundreds. So we hope this kind of, the whole EEC programme have brought up lots and lots of different people, so we can really accumulate in a festival this year, which will be, really very broad, lots and lots of new events.
Well, maybe that's a good point at which to talk about the festival. I think it's quite clear from what Neil said that even in the short time the EEC project has been running, and that we've had more time and personnel and money available to spend on the arts. Even in that short time, there's a terrific expansion of the kind of modes and fields of arts activities which had been active and healthy before, but much more limited in being more congregated around music and drama and things related to that. And maybe it's a good question to ask ourselves when we're thinking, although now we've got festival running the whole year through almost, there is this 1 week in June where we especially focus on these arts activities. Now that there is so many other kinds of things going on, does this mean that we have to think again about our festival? Is it going to be a much wider thing? How do we see it? And to begin that discussion, have you anything that you want to say about last year's festival?
Last year started to run races. Every time you run a race, the cars cutting across the middle of the race course. And I think I thought when we were trying to run races, cars were cutting across the middle. No, you get a bit sort of petitioned up for children's activities races, made that out, bring the children more into it.
I think one of the problems we faced with that fair was the fact that we asked certain people we had 40 events, and some people really organised things well, and they went without a hitch, and others really were in absolute shambles. So I hope that this year we can spend a little bit more time with each organiser and make sure that if there's any problems going to come up like that, we can solve it.
I feel that it's a bit mixed up with what's happening, because then you get the impression, although I think it's true to say that you can see everything going on, and it's good because people are going everywhere. There's so much to see, so much to do. That's a real fairground, and that's one reason why it's an issue.
What about trying to get in sort of local pop groups rather than sort of
We did do that, yeah.
More from Craigmillar?
Well, we tried to make it sort of a representative group. The trouble is that the local groups sometimes weren't up to the standard of keeping the audience.
Which I don't think is important.
Well, that's what I was saying, it's also the home made it.
It takes them out, for one thing it takes them out.
And meet other people. Tom, you were going to say something.
Well, it was just about our existence, what you, I think, already got in mind with the cinema out.
Yeah.
The gap. We getting over that for a couple of hours. I mean, the people in Craigmillar, let's face it, must be feeling really low, because the things are there for them, and nobody's giving them it. Nobody's going either way, leeway or whatnot. This is used and elderly. And I think that it's really something that we should try and get off the ground.
You see, one of the things with the cinema idea was that I thought a Saturday morning for children, but we could talk to other folk who sees it, we could probably use it something like that all the week round. I mean, there's lots of folk, I think, well, for one thing, is unemployed, me.
really similar, because it's a list of all. I wrote my letter, got a reply back saying facilities that were already existing in the bingo hall would be sort of put at risk. And 2050 was I'd be right in thinking it's up to the journey to decide. Well, it's a curious thing.
janitors.
Yeah. And the thing is, the curious thing is that the use of the schools really depends on the janitor being there. He isn't there. Yeah.
I would suggest is the most difficult set of ideas to elicit from the people, because on the whole the people are not accustomed to thinking in those terms. And what you've got to be doing, one of the agencies of an organisation such as the Festival Society should be to raise, to fly philosophical kites, if you like, among the people, to raise ideas, to stimulate and to hope to stimulate a response. If I could just go on to one of the ideas that I was thinking, as I said, I've been thinking about of late, and that is the strong parallel which I find between Craigmillar as a deprived area and underdeveloped regions in the third world. I think there are very strong correlations to be made, and I think it would be particularly valuable if we were in society were to regard Craigmillar's problems as analogous to those of the third world, and to look at some of the third world's solutions which people are pursuing in the third world.
Disagree with yourself. It's quite frankly, I think that we've got various planning agencies who are the mechanics of getting various things done, and they're being told by the community what should be done. I agree there's a problem with the community able to identify particular priorities, and I think there are various techniques we can use to do this actually. But as long as you don't ask the community to articulate these ideas in a professional way, you know, sort of
I wasn't suggesting that for a moment.
And I think there are many ways that this can be done, and many techniques are available for doing this, and this is where it's one of the few things I think that professionals have to know. But certainly should not be setting goals. That's
I mean, the participation exercise that you have had for a long time, I mean, you've been out in plan banks and things like that. If we can start along this way of thinking as well, and to see how the ordinary people feel about it too. You know, we'll have to start thinking in terms now of real participation, not just the in-group, but without it.
Yes, because quite frankly, I think what doesn't come out of the sort of thing that